The message came in late at night at exactly 11:51 p.m. Just a few minutes after I had finished something that should have felt like a proud moment. I had just approved a wire transfer for $10,500, the final payment for the venue where my sister Morgan was planning to launch her boutique studio. She had been talking about this moment for 8 long months, building it up like it was going to change everything. I was still staring at the confirmation screen on my laptop. That small line that said transaction successful, feeling tired but quietly satisfied, like all the effort had finally meant something. Then my phone lit up. It was Morgan. Hey, just a heads up. Tomorrow's VIP launch dinner is only for the creative team and close family. So maybe sit this one out. We'll send pictures. I read it once, then again. Not because I didn't understand the words, but because they didn't make sense when you placed them next to reality. I wasn't just family. I wasn't just some extra guest. I had been there from the beginning. I had built pieces of this with her. Or more accurately, I had paid for the pieces that made everything else possible. Before I could even respond, another notification appeared. My mother, Susan, had reacted to the message in our family group chat with a heart. That's when something inside me went still. There were no tears, no anger rising, no shaking hands, just a cold, steady clarity settling in my chest. They weren't asking me to step back. They were telling me I had never really been included to begin with. Before I tell you exactly what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd really like to know who's here with me. I didn't give myself time to feel anything. Feeling would slow me down, and I couldn't afford that. I needed to think clearly. My laptop screen was still open, glowing softly in the dark room. The confirmation of the transfer was still there, almost mocking me. I opened a new tab and went straight to the catering company's portal. My fingers moved without hesitation. I had created that account. I had chosen the menu. I had negotiated every detail. I clicked Manage Booking, then Cancel Service. The system asked for a reason. I didn't type anything long or emotional. I selected Funding Withdrawn. Next, I opened the state business portal. This part was bigger, more serious, the part most people would hesitate on. Morgan's financial record wasn't strong. Late payments, overdrafts, poor credit history, it was all there. The only reason she had secured the lease for that studio and the business license was because I had signed as guarantor. My name had been the foundation holding everything together. I found the application, clicked into it, and selected Revoke Guarantor Status. A warning appeared on the screen, asking me to confirm that I understood the consequences, that the business license would be suspended and the lease agreement would be voided immediately. I didn't pause. I clicked Confirm. At 12:03 a.m. the confirmation email arrived. 12 minutes. That's all it took to undo something that had taken me years of support, effort, and sacrifice to build. I leaned back in my chair. The room quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I didn't feel emotional. I felt precise. Like I had just finished a task that needed to be done. To understand why I made that choice, you have to understand that this wasn't about one message or one dinner. This was about everything. The $3,000 I paid for her rebranding last spring because she said her business needed to look premium. The $5,000 espresso machine she insisted was the heart of the entire concept. The rent deposit, the legal paperwork, the inventory, the countless small expenses that added up over time. For years, I told myself I was just helping, that I was being supportive, that I was the silent partner behind the scenes. But silence can hide truth. And the truth was, I wasn't just helping. I had been earning my place since childhood. I had learned something without even realizing it, that my place in the family wasn't automatic. It depended on what I provided. If I was useful, I belonged. If I solved problems, I mattered. If I didn't, I disappeared. I paid for connection the same way people pay their monthly bills, regularly, carefully, afraid of what would happen if I stopped. Morgan's message wasn't just a small insult. It was a statement. I had paid, but I still wasn't invited. They wanted everything I provided. Without having to acknowledge me, they wanted the results, not the source. I looked again at the revoked status on my screen. For the first time in years, I realized something important. That connection I thought I was maintaining, it wasn't something they were holding over me. It was something I had been choosing to continue. And now, I had stopped. If I had to pay to be included, then it was never family. It was a transaction. And that transaction was over. The next morning came quickly. I woke up before my alarm, the room still dim, the air quiet and heavy. I had only slept a few hours, but it felt different, deep, uninterrupted, almost peaceful. At 7:15 a.m., my phone started buzzing nonstop. The catering office had opened at 7 o'clock. I picked up my phone and saw the damage. 17 missed calls from Morgan. 5 from my mother. The group chat was full. Megan, answer me. The caterer says the booking is cancelled. They're refusing to deliver without payment. What is wrong with you? Then a voice message from my mother. I pressed play. Megan, I don't know what kind of childish game you're playing, but you need to fix this right now. Your sister is in tears. You're ruining everything over not being invited. Grow up. Send the money back immediately. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around me. Jealous. Petty. Childish. The words didn't hurt. They confirmed everything. When you stop giving, people who depend on you don't thank you for what you've done. They get angry about what they've lost. This wasn't about feelings, this was panic. They weren't upset because I was hurt, they were upset because I had stopped funding them. I didn't respond, I didn't call back. I got out of bed and made coffee. Moving through my kitchen slowly, calmly, the silence around me felt different now, not empty. Safe. Another message came from Morgan. This time. Safter, you're overreacting. Mom didn't mean anything. The seating was just limited. We were going to celebrate with you later. Please, the investors are coming tonight. If there's no food, we'll look unprofessional. Don't do this. I read it once, then took a sip of my coffee. Next week, that's when I mattered. When no one important was watching. But tonight, when everything had to look perfect, I was something to hide. I opened the group chat. I didn't explain, I didn't argue, I simply typed, the investment has been withdrawn, the guarantor status has been revoked. You should contact your investors to cover the catering. Then I left the chat. My phone rang again instantly. This time, it was my father. I let it go to voicemail. They were scrambling now, trying to hold something together that had always depended on me without my support. Their team was just people standing in an empty space with no resources. For the first time, the truth was visible. They weren't independent, they were dependent, and I was done carrying them. I sat down at my desk and opened a new document. If I was going to end this, I was going to do it properly, not emotionally. Professionally. I started listing everything. Every payment, every transfer, every expense that had been labeled as temporary or to be repaid later. Dates, amounts, notes. When I finished, the total came to $8,400 separate from the $10,500 I had just canceled. I drafted a formal email, clear, direct, no emotion. 30 days to propose a repayment plan. After that, legal action. As I attached the documents, I noticed a voicemail from my father. I hesitated, then pressed play. Megan, his voice was low, tense. You fix this right now. Call them back. You are going to destroy this family over your ego. Do you hear me? You're going to destroy us. I listened again. Destroy this family, not you hurt your sister, not we're disappointed. Destroy. I paused the message and stared at the screen. Why would canceling catering destroy a family unless it wasn't just dinner? I opened an old email thread Morgan had accidentally left me on weeks ago. This time, I read it carefully. Buried deep inside was a document, a draft agreement. The VIP dinner wasn't just a celebration. It was a signing event. An ownership agreement. My eyes moved down the page. Looking for my name, expecting it. But it wasn't there. Instead, I saw another name, Kyle, Morgan's FIANCE acute. 40% ownership. The money I sent, it wasn't for food. It wasn't for celebration. It was the buy-in. They were using my money to give him my place. I leaned back slowly, the truth settling in fully now. I hadn't just paid for the event. I had funded my own replacement. My father wasn't afraid of a ruined dinner. He was afraid that without my money, the plan would fall apart and the perfect image they were building wouldn't survive. My father wasn't scared of a ruined dinner. He was scared that without my money, Kyle wouldn't get his equity and the shiny perfect engagement narrative would crumble. They weren't just using me, they were liquidating me. My hands started to shake again. But this time it wasn't the detached chill of shock, it was the adrenaline of discovery. The draft agreement in my email was just a draft. It wasn't legally binding, not yet. But to file for the amended business license, the one that would add Kyle to the ownership structure, they needed the consent of the current guarantor. I navigated back to the state portal, the same one I had used to revoke my status 2 nights ago. I dug deeper into the document history tab. There it was, uploaded 3 days ago. Waiver of equity and transfer of guarantor rights. I clicked View PDF. The document loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, revealing a signature at the bottom of page 4. It was my signature, the loop of the M, the sharp tail of the N. It was perfect, to perfect. It looked exactly like the signature I used on my checks. Then I looked at the date next to it, August 14th. On August 14th, I was in Chicago for a conference. I wasn't in the state. I wasn't in a room with a notary. I hadn't signed anything. They had traced it or copy-pasted it from the original lease agreement. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. This wasn't just toxic family dynamics anymore. This wasn't just a narcissistic injury, this was felony fraud. My mother's heart emoji on the exclusion text suddenly made a sickening kind of sense. It wasn't just cruelty, it was dismissal. They didn't need to invite me because they thought they had already extracted everything they needed. They had my money, my credit, and my signature. Why would they need the person attached to them? I looked at the document on my screen. It was a smoking gun. If I hadn't revoked my guarantor status when I did, if I had waited even 24 hours, cried for a day, or tried to talk it out, this document would have been processed. Kyle would be a 40% owner. My $10,000 would be gone, legally converted into his equity. I would have been locked out of my own investment with nothing but a forged piece of paper to prove I ever existed. The realization crystallized in my mind, sharp and lethal. They weren't just bad family. They were criminals, and I was the only witness. I downloaded the PDF. Then I downloaded the metadata showing the upload time and IP address. I took screenshots of the flight records proving I was in Chicago on the date of the signature. I compiled it all into a single folder labeled evidence. I didn't call a lawyer this time. I called the non-emergency police line to file a report for identity theft and forgery. The operator asked if I knew who might have forged the document. Yes, I said, my voice steady, my sister and her fiancé. This was the kill shot. There was no coming back from this. There were no apologies that could cover a felony. The bridge wasn't just burned. I had dynamite at the foundation. 48 hours later, the silence was broken, not by a phone call, but by a knock. The business license had been flagged. The venue had released the date to another client. The investors, spooked by the sudden cancellation and rumors of legal trouble, had pulled out. The launch wasn't just postponed, it was dead, and without the launch, without the capital, Kyle had walked. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother, Susan. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed. She wasn't screaming this time. She wasn't demanding. She looked like a woman who had just watched her house burn down. I opened the door, but I didn't step back. I stood in the frame blocking the way. Megan, she said, her voice cracking. Please, we're losing everything. Morgan, she's not okay. The investors are gone. Kyle left. They're going to sue us for the lease break fee. We don't have that kind of money. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but stopped when she saw my face. Please, she whispered. Just talk to the licensing board. Tell them it was a mistake. Reinstate the guarantee. We can fix this. She's your sister. I looked at her. This woman who had hearted the text that excluded me. This woman who had watched me pay for everything and called me petty for stopping. I can't do that, I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was just final. Why? She sobbed. Do you hate us that much? Is this about the dinner? We'll throw you a dinner. We'll do whatever you want. It's not about the dinner, Mom. I reached for the folder on the entry table. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. The photocopy of the forged waiver of equity. It's about this. I handed it to her. She took it confused, her eyes scanning the page. I watched the moment she recognized my signature and then the date. I watched the blood drain from her face. As the realization hit, she knew, deep down, she knew what they were capable of. You forged my signature to steal my equity. I said you weren't just excluding me from a party. You were stealing $10,000 from me. That's not family drama, that's a felony. She stared at the paper, her hands trembling. Megan, we didn't. Morgan said she talked to you. Don't. I cut her off. I filed a police report this morning. The case number is at the bottom. Her head snapped up, horror in her eyes. You called the police on your sister? I called the police on the people who stole my identity. That just happened to be my sister. I took the paper back from her shaking hands. I saved myself, Mom, and now you need to leave, but she'll go to jail. You can't. I can, I said. And I did. Goodbye. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I listened as she stood there for a long time sobbing on the other side, but I didn't feel guilty. I felt that immense crushing weight of obligation finally lift off my shoulders. I hadn't destroyed the family. I had just turned on the lights and the cockroaches had scattered. The weeks that followed weren't chaotic, they were quiet. But it wasn't the silence of abandonment, it was the silence of peace. The business never launched. Without the venue, without the catering, and with the legal cloud hanging over the equity transfer, the investors pulled out completely. Morgan's fiancé, Kyle, broke off the engagement 2 months later. It turns out his commitment to her was contingent on the 40% stake in a debt-free company he thought he was getting. My parents tried to reach out a few times, angry voicemails, guilt, tripping emails about how I had ruined Morgan's life. I archived them without listening. I didn't need to know their version of the story anymore. I knew the truth. One Tuesday evening, 6 months later, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. My apartment was clean, my bank account was growing. Again, no longer drained by emergency loans or family investments. I opened my laptop and found an old spreadsheet titled Family Projects. It was a detailed log of every dollar I had spent over 5 years trying to buy their love, car payments, rent help, gifts that were really bailouts. The final total at the bottom was staggering, enough for a down payment on a house, enough for a wedding of my own. I hovered my mouse over the file for a second. I let myself imagine the alternative. I closed my eyes and pictured the life I almost lived. I saw myself sitting at that VIP dinner, squeezed into a corner table while Morgan and Kyle toasted to their new venture. I saw myself smiling through the eraser, clapping for the owners while my bank account sat empty. I saw myself 10 years from now, still the silent partner, still the guarantor, still waiting for a thank you that would never come while they leveraged my credit to fund their next mistake. The horror of that image made my empty apartment feel like a sanctuary. The silence wasn't lonely, it was expensive. It was the luxury I had finally bought for myself. I opened my eyes. I selected the spreadsheet. I hit delete. The file vanished. I took a sip of wine. The air was cool and down. On the street, life was moving on. People were walking dogs, laughing, going to dinners they were actually invited to. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was part of the world, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I was already home. If you've ever felt like the ATM for people who treat you like a stranger, share this story.